Hi everybody, it's Dave with Reality Reimagined. In today's video, we're essentially going to go through a live explanation of what was in the article in the January edition of Shutter Magazine, the Beauty Edition. Now, something you may notice is that our talent on camera is a lot different from the person who's in the article because unfortunately yours truly shot the footage behind the scenes when we did that initial shoot for the magazine, and the footage got a little wonky. So we're reshooting it with my wonderful friend Veronica, who has actually been in the magazine in the December issue as well as October and November. So October, November, December, and January, 4 months in a row, she's now a part of the Shutterfest family. So in the article, we discussed butterfly lighting and how it can be augmented with various elements to increase where the light is thrown, to overcome some of the shadows and so forth, and especially doing something like that on a budget. So this video today is going to show that to you and give you an idea of the angles of the light, which is absolutely key, and how simple things like some foam core or a piece of white poster board and a stool can be used to replicate some of the stuff that we'll have on camera. So let's talk about the setups that we're going to go through, and then we'll get to the photography. So the first setup of light is to use this main strobe that we have in the frame, and this is a beauty dish. You do not necessarily have to use a beauty dish. You can use an octabox, you can use a square modifier, you can potentially use a clip light from Lowe's and have no diffusion on it whatsoever. It's the angle of the light that is absolutely key. With this light coming above her at a 45-degree angle, that is going to cascade down, hit her face, and then fall off. But the key is her jawline will be cut out. You'll have a soft shadow under her nose that takes the shape of a butterfly, hence the term butterfly lighting. So this is a very dramatic way to get even light onto somebody, but cut them out and make a little bit of drama by those shadows. However, the shadows can become a problem if the light is too heavy, meaning there's a lot of light there, or for instance, things like if they're wearing eyelashes that are extending out a lot, that can cause some shadow into the eyes themselves. And based upon certain body types and certain facial types, you may not necessarily want to have really strong shadow into the image itself. And that's where the second setup today comes into play in the form of this highlighter. Now, my highlighter comes from a company called Strobe Pro, but there's many different companies that will use highlighters. What this does is using a piece of solid material that's white. The material either will be white or it will be silver, and it will be like the same kind of material you would see in a reflector. So that when the light cascades down and hits her, it's going to bounce off her body, but some of it will be caught by this solid surface of white and then bounce right back into the frame. And the key to that is then some of those shadows are lifted just a little bit. They're not overcome and overpowered because then that would defeat the whole point of butterfly lighting. They're just filled in just a little bit. And that's why I'm using the white material today. If I was using the silver material, it would throw considerably more light and you would get some more specular highlights in the eyes and so forth. Highlighters have been popular for a while. They, I think, were first kind of used to create the very unique catch lights in the bottom of the iris as one of their elements of being advantageous to use in shoots. But realistically, it's a surface that is going to throw light back into the scene. Do you have to use an highlighter? Do you have to use this U shape? Not necessarily at all. You can use a stool with a piece of white poster board, foam core. You can put a table in front of them and in a white sheet. And often in standing portraits, when you're doing beauty portraits, there will be a table for the model to pose against so that they can put their elbows onto it and so forth. And usually that surface is white so that the light cascades, hits them, hits the table, comes back in, and gently fills in some of those shadows so you get the best of both worlds. The final setup that we'll do, and I'm not going to set it up right now, we'll do it here in just a moment, is to bring some V-flats into the scene. And the V-flats essentially are going to be really large two pieces of foam core at a 90-degree angle. And so that they will essentially capture any light that falls out of the scene and come right back in. So from a photography perspective, we're illuminating our subject directly from the front. Any of the shadows are being gently filled, but then on either side of our subject, we're introducing light again, all coming from one light source. And that's why I love butterfly lighting. Not necessarily to save you money in your piggy bank so you don't have to buy a whole bunch of lights and strobes, but more importantly, it gets back to some of the basics of what I think is important in photography. All the work that I do, whether it's The fantasy composites, which I'm known for, are my background shooting high school senior portraits and weddings for a number of years, or gel glamour, or anything that I do. I light my subject and scene to tell the story, not to necessarily make everything accurate, perfect, beautiful lighting on set. I light to tell the story. And I love that butterfly lighting, with some basic, simple pieces of material that will throw light back into the scene, this wonderful, dramatic storytelling with light can be done with one light source. And that's absolutely essential, again, if you're starting on a budget into this industry, or if you've been around for a long time and you've got 1,300 strobes and 17,000 light modifiers. Sometimes it's good to go back to basics. And that basic is one light source, a couple pieces of white material that throws the light back into the scene, and then it's up to you to get the right poses, the right story, and be an artist and photographer all over again. So I'm gonna meter up Veronica to make sure that the light is good. My intent today is to be shooting this at f11, ISO 400, and my shutter speed will be 1/160th of a second. So this is a light meter from Sekonic. If you do not use a light meter, that's okay, but do not trust your LCD in the back of your camera because they are not accurate for light. So if you can't afford one right now, that's totally fine, but get to a point where you get a light meter and meter up your light so that you know every frame that you're taking is precisely the f-stop and settings you're looking for. So with the diode extended, I'm gonna put it right under her chin because her chin and the tip of her nose are the closest thing to the light source itself. I'm gonna point it up toward the diode, fire my light, and I'm at f11.6. So I'm gonna bring my light down just a smidge, reset the light, put the diode up again, f11 on the money. That's exactly where I want to be. Now, if she moves a little bit into this scene, back or forward, that's okay. It's going to be potentially slightly brighter or slightly darker. That's all right. We're in the realm of f11, and that's where we need to be to get some nice, good portraits today. So, lights are metered. We have our first light. I'm gonna take the eye lighter out of the scene. We know the poses we're gonna go to. So, it's time to start photographing, and I'm using the Canon R, which is the first full-frame mirrorless camera that they made. This is my baby. It's so pretty. I love this camera so much. Thank you, Canon. Anyway, they don't sponsor me at all yet. But I'm gonna be using the Canon R. I'm using a 24-70 2.8 lens, f11, ISO 400, 1/160th of a second. Let's get to the photography. Hold. Let's do both hands on the hips. There you go, perfect, good. That's perfect. Hold that one for me. Okay, pose number 2. Both elbows, holding both elbows. Remember, you were holding both. Oh. There you go. And then we'll do pose number 3. Okay, good. Right there. Hold. And now pose number 3. Okay, good. Right there. Yeah, let's make contact with your jawline right in there. There. Good. Hold that one. And take your left shoulder away just a little bit. There, not too much. Right there. Good. Here we go. So as you can see, that one light cascading down from that angle at 45 degrees to the subject creates so many beautiful shadows and tells such a wonderful image and story inside of that. And again, I'm using the Beauty Dish, which tends to be a little hotter with light, a little harsher with it. If you can use a Octabox or any kind of softbox, it's not necessarily the modifier that matters so much, it's just, again, the angle that it's cascading down. But now it's time to move on to the second set by bringing in the eye lighter itself so that you can see how those shadows will start to lift a little bit by just a simple surface coming in with the white solid. So I'm going to bring it into the bay. I'm using a mini stand so that it's down low. You can use a normal light stand and bring it up high if you wish, but obviously it's going to, constrict the shot that you can shoot based upon how much they're being covered up by it. So now it's right in front of her, it's tilted slightly toward her, and it should cascade some light back into the shadows, so let's find out. Okay, so the light's good. Go back to pose 1 for me. Making sure that I'm still at f11, ISO 400, and 1/160th of a second. And here we go. Holy cats, vastly different. Pose number 2. On the elbow, hands on the elbows. There you go, perfect. And then 3. Fantastic. So that simple little surface, and I know it can seem like, well, duh, yeah, the light's going to hit and bounce and you've got something there, but I want you to understand that it's little elements like this. And it doesn't have to mean that you run out and buy a new eyeliner, because they're north of $100, less than 2, I believe. You don't have to do that. If you had a stool and a white piece of paper, like go to Target or wherever and get a piece of poster board and find something to set it on in front of them, and instantaneously that solid surface is going to lift the shadows just a little bit and create yet another style that's a mix of both worlds, of a little bit of drama with the shadows, but a little lifting into it so it isn't quite dramatic, especially in beauty portraits. So let's move on to the third and final setup, which is bringing in the V-flats, so you can see how those two elements will cascade light in for our final look. Okay, now it's time for the third and final setup, which is bringing in the V-flats themselves. V-flats are essentially just really large pieces of poster board or foam core. You can get professionally made V-flats from companies like V-Flat World that are actually very portable from what I've heard. Or you can go to Lowe's and buy 2 panels of insulation board, spray paint one side white, one side black, and then just tape them together. They're essentially 2 large pieces of material taped at the spine, so just like a book cover, they have a flat that can open up and make a V, so that the light is captured by it and thrown back into the scene. They can be used in an L formation, they can be used in the traditional sense of the letter V, and that's how we're going to use them today. So I'm going to bring these 2 in. This particular V-flat is a double-paneled V-flat, so it has 2 pieces on either side of material that's been taped together. So it's more heavy-duty, more stern. It doesn't bounce any more or less light. It's just more steady and sturdy on set. And then we'll bring in the second one. And my goal is to make sure nobody puts David in a V-flat. Anyway, my goal is to make sure that this is just, it's from Dirty Dancing, that's this piece is just outside of my camera frame. I'm shooting a pretty tight beauty portrait, so I don't necessarily need to have a lot of space on either side. And that's where also something like compositing can come into play. If I did need to have a landscape orientation shot, I can still shoot this in portrait orientation and then just use Photoshop to fill in the blanks. But in this case, I just want them to be off frame just enough so that I don't see them in camera, but they are still close enough to her to cascade and capture in some of that light. So I may have to make some fine-tune adjustments once I'm able to see where this is going to be set up in my frame. So, okay, I've got a little bit more play on the left than the right, on camera left. And one more time. Perfect, they are just outside the frame, and they should be good to go. So let's take a few shots and see where we're at. You have one little strand of hair that came over to play. There you go, good. Rest looks fine, here we go. Chin up a little bit, awesome, hold for me. So, as you can see, and I'm going to show on the screen 3 different comparisons of these images. The first image is just with the one light. It's very dramatic, it's very dark, but it's still well illuminated at that f11 setting. Then by bringing in the highlighter, we lift those shadows, and now by creating in the third shot these 2 panels, all of this cascading light, you would think that she was in a set with multiple lights, but it's just one. It's just this one strobe being used in our scene, set at that 45-degree angle, so everything cascades through. So that's the setup for today and for this video. And again, I want to stress this is something that you can set up on your own using very expensive materials and modifiers and so forth. But I highly encourage any of you that have never done anything like this, go to Lowe's, find some insulation board, get a piece of poster board from Target and set it on a table and just experiment. Experiment with using different pieces. Make something out of tinfoil if you don't have a reflector, or use a reflector itself. The key is to understand that in photography, and at least for me, that it's all about story. It's all about creating a beautiful image in story and using whatever you need and whatever you can afford to create all of that. So thank you for watching the video. Thank you for reading the Shutter magazine. Thank you, Veronica, for being on camera. And hopefully we'll see you next month in another video and article in Shutter.